Now, one thing that we do with power is that we kind of look at the practical implications of looking at the cost of electricity. So your power bill, someday when you're an adult and you have to pay electricity, you're actually not paying for electricity, you're paying for energy. And the way they sell energy is sold per kilowatt hour. And so you're thinking, well, what is that unit? A kilowatt hour, how is that energy? Well, let's think about this. If power is energy divided by time, then energy is just power times time. And if we have if we have power in the units of kilowatts, and we have time in the units of hours, we can get a kilowatt hour. So oftentimes you will be looking at figuring out, well, how many kilowatt hours have I consumed, and then how do I find what that cost is? So you would find the energy value, and then to figure out the cost, you would just multiply the rate, whatever the, 15 cents per kilowatt hour, 17 cents per kilowatt hour, etc. Take that rate and then multiply it by the amount of energy that you've used. Okay, so we'll look at a few examples of just calculating power, but then also calculating out the cost of electricity.
Okay, so this is going to be just two class examples of calculating out the cost of electricity when we're utilizing an electrical device. So let's just remind ourselves of some equations. So we know that innately to figure out the power of something, P is equal to IV, or we could say P is equal to I squared R, or it could be V squared over R. Remember the power equation, there's a couple permeations of that. And then in terms of whenever we're figuring out the cost of electricity, we need to figure out how much energy is being consumed. And so energy is going to be power times time. And another way to think about that is our energy is going to be the amount of kilowatts we have times the hours we have. And our units for this is the one time where we have the weird unit of hours and not seconds, just because it's easier to figure out the value of energy in terms of hours. We get a reasonable number. And then once we have the energy to figure out our cost is going to be our energy times whatever the rate is. And we can kind of think about that as our cost is going to be our kilowatt hours times, however much per kilowatt hour. Okay, so let's go through two examples of this. And again, it's helpful if you are calculating on your own with your own calculator. So it says a TV set draws 2 amps when operated at 120 volts. Let's just identify quantities. 2 amps. Amps is current. Operated at 120 volts, so that is my voltage value. How much power does the set use? So that's pretty straightforward. P is equal to IV. Mental math says that 2 times 120 is 240 watts. Now here's the thing. When we're figuring out cost of electricity, we need kilowatts. So we need to divide by 1,000. So 240 watts is the same thing as 0.24 kilowatts, okay? And so whenever we're eventually figuring out the cost of electricity, we need to convert to kilowatts. It then says it's used on average 7 hours a day and energy costs, but okay, so there's my rate. My rate is 18 cents per kilowatt hour. What is the operating cost per month? Okay, so my time is 7 hours per day, but I've got a month. And so we're just going to always do an average. We're going to say that a month has 30 days. So our time value is going to be 7 times 30. That is 210 hours. Okay. So I need to go through, I figured out my power. That's kind of my step one. My step two is figuring out my energy value. So energy is equal to power times time. I've got my kilowatts, 0.24 kilowatts, times my time in hours, which is right here, 210 hours. And I multiply those two together, and I don't even have that value, 0.24 times 210, that gets me 50.4 kilowatt hours. And then to figure out my cost is my energy times my rate. So that's going to be 50.4 times my rate of 0.18. Multiply those two together and you end up getting $9.07 per month, huh? And that's just for one TV. Some of you people have like a gabillion TVs in your home.